Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack back again to bring you the Oracle Holy Disc Talent Priest mockup that they have so far. In this, we're going to go over the talents really quickly and then talk about how they are also going to be functioning. And big shout out to Taliesin, who put together like the initial dev interview. I'll have that linked in the description down below as well. So first and foremost, this is a power infusion replacement. Premonition is replacing Power Infusion, which is going to be super important to note because it's going to give you 3 different buffs that you can be giving to your players. Since it's replacing Power Infusion, it's also going to give you this benefit or something similar from Twins of the Sun Priestess. So if, for example, you are activating Premonition and you give somebody Solace, which increases the target's healing received by 25%, then you also potentially would be receiving that for yourself. So how Premonition actually works, this really took me a second to figure out, and this actually helped me a lot with Twisted Fate because I don't play League of Legends, where you're activating the buff, and then it cycles quickly between these 3 buffs, and then you cast it again onto that target to be able to see. It sounds like you only have to hit it twice, where you'll activate it and then have to wait, and for that buff to actually cycle in. And since, of course, it's replacing Power Infusion, it's also going to be off the global cooldown. And from the way it was also described, it sounds like it's going to go Solace, then Insight, then Glory, where you'll be able to actually choose which one of those every single time that you'd like to use it. So if you're in like an M+ environment, you might want to buff the Mage with Insight, and you'd have to hit Solace, go into Insight, wait for it to go past Solace as it cycles on its own, then catch it, hit Insight onto that target, and then be able to buff the Mage as well. And the next round, you would hit it again on that 1-minute cooldown, buff an ally with Insight, or cast the buff, have Insight, apply it to your ally, and then be able to move on. And then third round, you'd have Glory, and then you have to wait for it to cycle between Glory, then Insight, and then it goes back. Glory, then Solace, and then goes back to Insight as well. Kind of like having to cycle through it. It's not like Summer where you have one buff and then it goes on to the next one. It's constantly cycling, they said, about every second from that dev interview to be able to buff the allies. There's some support talents that you have alongside of it. Some of these are pretty cool. Some of them are kind of whatever. Preemptive Care, increase the duration of Atonement and Renew. And keep in mind, this is for Holy and Disc. So are we still going to have a similar tier set for Holy Priests where they're casting lots of Renew and that could be really impactful? Or are we getting stuff like Benediction or maybe some more Renew uptime out of things like Salvation? Meh. Premonition, cause your next Radiance, Heal, or Prayer of Healing to be instant cast and cost less mana with waste no time. Or, as I mentioned, I think these are the choice nodes that we have. You could have Miraculous Recovery, which reduces the cooldown of Powered Life by 3 seconds and allows it to be usable on targets below 50%. I think this one could be really cool, particularly in a key environment where trying to catch somebody at 35% before they get like topped off or before they health pot or something can be kind of a pain. So that actually seems kind of exciting. A predictable instant cast Radiance seems really exciting. On the left side with Preventative Measures, it increases the damage absorbed by shield and the healing done by Prayer of Mending. Yeah, cool. This synergizes with Assured Safety, where Powered Shield applies a stack of Prayer of Mending to the target. Prayer of Mending casts apply a Powered Shield to your target at 20% effectiveness. So this is one that Small Priest brought up of making sure that this isn't having Disc Priests being incentivized to cast Prayer of Mending because it maybe would apply Atonement. Doesn't seem like it's going to at the moment, but that was part of the concern. And I really hope that is not going to be the case. I kind of hope that this is like only for Disc, Powered Shield applies a Prayer of Mending. Only for Holy, Prayer of Mending gives them a shield. And then they kind of continue on with that spec-based tuning for something like Grand Reveal, where your shield is fully absorbed or your Prayer of Mending heals, you gain a stack of Grand Reveal, and at 150 stacks, you get an additional charge of Premonition. I like the idea of like answered prayers and being able to like build up your stacks for a specific moment to have some more burst or something where you can kind of see it coming. I just really don't want to have gameplay centered around Prayer of Mending for Disc, especially after we just got out of this like high button bloat period that we had going on. Same thing with Holy. I don't think they really need to be weaving in like Powered Shields as well. This middle choice node of having Prompt Deliverance, which is reducing the cooldown of Purify. Divine Feathers, when an ally walks through your feather, you're also granted 100% of its effect. These things just seem kind of niche and situational, often kind of garbage. So without any sort of change to Feather where you can cast on other people, it doesn't really seem like it's that impactful. Pain Suppression reduces damage taken by an additional 10%. Guardian Spirit lasts an additional 2 seconds. This also seems a lot more weighted towards Disc than Holy. I think a 50% DR is kind of insane compared to 2 extra seconds of the cheat death, but that's just me. Perfect Vision reduces the cooldown of Premonition. Versatile Divination. Premonition can now trigger the Brilliance and Urgency effects. Brilliance can restore 5% of your target's mana. Urgency increases your target's haste. So I would assume, and again, we kind of have to see, but being able to have those extra effects being triggered where if the target doesn't have mana or something, you're increasing their haste in addition to increasing their damage could be really insane. Potentially also giving you that buff as well. But the challenge that I have is I don't think you're really ever going to be giving anybody mana that would want it. Unless it's, I don't know, an arcane mage or something along those lines. But I don't really think you're in a position where you're buffing other targets healing or other healers, for example, to really make good use of it. And so it might be something that you get for mana regen. Divine Providence increases the duration of your Premonition effects by 2 seconds. So again, longer lasting damage buffs. Fate Bender. Premonition's effect is increased by 30% if the divine spell is different than the previous Premonition. So this is where you might want to actually weave between buffing the mage and buffing the warrior. And this is also where some of the issue of like having to sit there and wait for the proper cycle between A, B, and C could be mitigated because you would want to have this 30% increased power by jumping between buffing 2 different people. And so that's, I think, a really good change, or I think it's a really good effect. So that way you're going to be able to, you're not going to have to sit there and just wait for the blue buff every time before you actually hit the spell, cycling between, waiting, oh, it's blue, I hit it, waiting, oh, it's blue, I hit it, over and over again. So that, I think, helps. I think that's actually like a good talent to work with the system. But then we have Clairvoyance, where Premonition has a low chance to grant you Clairvoyance, granting your target and 2 nearby allies the effect of Premonition at 100% effectiveness. Again, boosting up this party-wide power infusion kind of setup. So now that Sokka's been sitting here listening, Sokka's one of my guildies, and he and I talk all the time about Disc and Holy and all kinds of content. How's it going, buddy?
What's up?
So with all of this in mind, did I get it right as well with cycling between these buffs and then you hit it again for when you want to cast it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's gonna be like every second it's gonna cycle through it, right?
Yeah. And so when you're going to be able to cast it on whoever you choose, I feel like the first thing that I want to do is like zoom out and like, how is this going to be fun, interesting, whatever you want to call it, for Holy and then for Disc? Because you're giving up power infusion, and even though you don't always have those moments where you get like a super powerful power infusion at a time that you can heal, because usually you're using it for a damage dealer, if anything, you're not even having like a haste benefit. And sometimes it's just like, oh, I get increased healing for myself. I get like a damage increase.
Yeah, I think something that was brought up in the dev discussion was, how does increasing magic damage affect you as like a holy priest, even
Right.
if you're talented into twins, or physical damage, or something like that, where it really just doesn't affect you at all? Does that make twins just like, if you're just going to be buffing a warrior the entire fight, do you even like take twins? That's kind of an awkward situation.
They did say that they're gonna make some kind of replacement for Glory.
Yeah.
So like the self buff that you get by casting Glory is gonna be something different at the very least.
I think what strikes me about this is how, at least from their initial numbers of like every second cycling, how like mechanically intensive this could get. Because we're talking about an off global cooldown ability. I don't know if it's like if you can cast it while you're casting like other spells, like you could do with like Mage Flame Blast or something.
So I'd assume not, because
I'm
I'd assume it works.
not.
Yeah, I assume it works
then,
just like PI, where you have to like not be casting something and then you get to use it.
But then we're talking about like if it's on a 1 second cycle, but your cast time for Smite is a little over a second.
Yeah.
You could be missing an entire cycle if you decide to cast Smite in that window. That seems like a pretty... this sounds something in its current state that's like, you're going to have to use some weak ore to tell you what to do.
Yeah,
Like,
or Or if it doesn't immediately go on cooldown, like if you hit Premonition and it doesn't start the cooldown until you apply the buff to somebody, then you start worrying about missing casts, because what happens if a mechanic gets on you and then you have to move for that and you're not thinking about who you're casting Premonition on, and then you're trying to move and then you start, you have like 15 seconds to cast it or something. You miss your
Yeah.
cycle and then you're on Solace and you don't want to give anybody increased healing, and then you have to sit
Never
there
wanna do
and
that.
wait.
Yeah, it's like, so Small asked this question in the interview, and it was like, they said that it starts the cooldown when you first like start the rotation of the buffs.
Okay.
Um, but that means that you can still start falling. Like you can definitely start falling behind if you're trying for like minute cycles, because like you said, you're gonna want to sit there for maybe 3-4 seconds. In the case of versatile divination, you might have to sit there for like 5 seconds before you get the buff you want,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of time that you're staring at the buff, like, going through the cycles, and you don't want to like do something that you're gonna miss it. That would fucking suck.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's
it's
the thing is also with versatile divinations, it now makes it so you cycle between 5 instead of 3.
yeah, exactly. And
So
I see, if I were to just take a random guess, I'm thinking like you're gonna find the mage, you're gonna find the warlock, and you're just gonna cycle between giving them haste and magic damage for that 30% buff, and you're just gonna do that every minute, right? That's like the world I see it in. Uh, which just makes, which ends up kind of like boiling it down to just like a harder version of PI,
yeah.
which might not even be better because you know it's not necessarily lining up with, everyone's got 2-minute cooldowns these days. No one's got a minute cooldown.
Well,
uh,
and that's the thing is you're trading one form of power in Power Infusion, which we know is insanely good, even if it's a 15% haste buff. You're
right.
trading that for something that requires more micro to actually work with. And like we don't even know, for example, what the next round of like the Void Weaver or Archon stuff's going to be. And so if it's like what Disc has Void Weaver, I think,
Yeah, yeah.
and then Holy has Archon, it's like, well, what if those things are just passive and then just free boosts instead of all this micro that you have to
Right.
deal with?
Like this is me giving up power infusion. I could just play the other thing and not give up power infusion,
Yeah,
and not have
yeah.
to think about it. And I think like what really strikes me is this capstone point, this clairvoyance thing,
Yeah.
because like we said, it can be like, you might be hitting someone not even in their CDs. Like let's say you're just like a mage and it's just like they're not even in combust, but you just hit them with it. And and that procs clairvoyance, and that's your one clairvoyance proc for the fight.
Yeah.
I don't know what a low chance is, but like that seems like an awfully strong buff for something that, like, me giving haste, like let's say 12% haste to 3 people, random people, unless I'm gonna do this like cringe evoker thing where I
Yeah.
walk around nearby allies, just it can never be in the game. Like it's just terrible. But like if that procs at a really good time, are we killing the boss? If it procs at a bad time, are we not killing the boss? Like that seems, cooldowns that are like randomly procced just seems like a recipe for sadness in a way.
It kind of feels like a PvP thing where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
guys, I have the super big buff. Like, okay, I'll hold it for, 5-10 seconds, and then we pop our cooldowns, and then we go, right? But, like, with everything being so strictly mapped out in a raid or M+ environment, like,
Yeah, what if I accidentally hit the Aug Evoker who's also trying to buff the mage? What if I hit him with Clairvoyance? That doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
That seems like maybe a 10-minute cooldown on making my next Premonition Clairvoyance or something. I don't know, but like I'm always super scared of stuff that's like high throughput but also just random procs. That always makes me scared.
Yeah. What do you think is going to be, what do you think is the most fun about this tree, and then the least fun?
The most fun thing about this tree, hopefully, is Premonition cycling being very powerful.
Yeah,
Like
Fate Bender?
maybe more than 30%. But if that can be it, I'm So to get to what I'm most scared of at the same time is the kind of mechanical aspect of it,
Yeah,
of like
yeah.
cycling it. I'm very scared that 1 second is just, this game is not built on 1 second cycles. This game is built on like 3 second cycles, you know. So if if that can kind of be adjusted to where Fate Bender feels like a really good button to press and you feel like you're getting rewarded for playing a different power infusion, that's definitely like an interesting button to think about, you know, in all forms of content, right?
Yeah.
PvE, you know, you got maybe you have target with physical damage, magic damage, like you have all these different options to you, more than just, well, I'm in a group with 2 outlaw rogues and you know, a demon hunter. I have to give PI to the demon hunter, right? Because that's like the only haste target, right?
Yeah, maybe if they made it so that it's like it's a different, maybe if the spell is different or if the target is different or something like that. Or maybe if they just made it so it's a different target.
I wonder they could just, you know, make this just completely smart and just say like, but then that kind of takes away, like, why is there a whole tree dedicated to just like a smart version of PI?
Yeah, that's odd.
Like okay, I'm gonna assume that if I cast it on a tank, it's gonna give him healing received, but no tank in the history of WoW has ever cared about their 25% more healing received, right?
right. That is super weird. All right. Any sort of final thoughts you have before I cut the video?
Yeah, I really hope that prayer of mending doesn't make it into the disc rotation.
Same.
And I really hope Powered Shield does not make it into the Holy Priest rotation, because that's just too many buttons.
100%. Yeah. I feel like instead of button bloat, they've added like mechanical bloat to this talent setup. And so like it's cool, but then are you getting enough juice out of the work it is to squeeze this lemon? It's like, and you have to give up power infusion for a lower cooldown ability that you have to also micromanage.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to see how Void Weaver or
Archon
address, well, kind of just how they address like the fact that you're definitely going to keep power infusion in those trees. So like that's like a big thing that stands out to me, is how you're going to make this such a more attractive thing that you're going to give up anything in any other tree to swap out power infusion, right?
100%. Talking about having power infusion replacing, or premonition replacing power infusion, is like, how does this even tie in with holy, since you're having insight granting an HPS buff to the target, but no real output buff that holy gets along the way? And they even mentioned in the interview they don't want to have shield getting utilized for assured safety, and we're looking at all these different ways you're buffing everybody else, and Fate Bender offering some good gameplay by buffing everybody else. But besides an atonement buff for disc, there's not really anything giving you juice besides, I don't know, maybe an instant cast Radiance at a Premonition. Having an instant cast heal or Poe, not really that great. And so the overall power of those specific specs, or like your personal specs, don't really feel realized. And it's more about just giving power to everybody else rather than making yourself feel good.